So now I want to tell you about our guest who's here with us today. Ellen Price is a temple coordinator with the Baha'i Temple, and she has a combination of video and presentation and just her thoughts. We're going to learn all about this beautiful temple that I know we've all driven by so many times on our way around here. So now we're going to learn kind of a more deep dive into the temple. So I'm going to turn things over to Ellen.
All right, thank you. So glad to be here. How many of you have actually been to the temple in person? All right, good. At least some of you have, because certainly you're only 19 miles away. So don't just watch it virtually. You have to be there in person, because anybody that's been there can tell you that photographs and videos don't do it justice. I mean, I remember the first time, I think maybe everybody remembers the first time they see it, and it's like, whoa, what is that? So please go if you haven't already been there in person. There's a little brief video that we'll just start with. It's called Four Seasons, and it just it's 4 minutes and shows the temple throughout the seasons, and it's beautiful no matter when you go. I mean, even sometimes when it's snowing like crazy, and it's difficult for people to get up the stairs, we have to bring them around to another entrance, but it's still just so gorgeous. So here we go. Ta-da. So this is the Baha'i House of Worship for North America. So it's the only Baha'i temple in North America. So there are 8 of these continental temples. So the Baha'i community had a goal of building 8 temples in certain areas around the world. And we completed that goal of the 8 in 2016 with the new one in Santiago, Chile. And so after that, now we're starting to build local and national houses of worship around the world. So we actually have 16 right now. And there's one being built in Canada. And so then we will have 2 in North America. Zip over here. Okay. So, so these are pictures of the 8 continental houses of worship, but you'll notice that there's 9. And that is because that first one, that's a black and white photo, the Baha'i faith began in Persia, which is Iran today. Oh, so sorry. Pull that up. Okay. Oh, there it is. There we go. Okay, now I'm sharing, right? Yay. Okay, thank you. So the first one that you see up in the top left is in Ashgabat, because the Baha'is in Iran were persecuted at the time. It was in the mid-1800s when the founder began, the religion began. And the Baha'is were persecuted then. They continue to be persecuted in Iran to this day. So they weren't able to build a temple there. So they went up to Russian Turkmenistan and built the temple there. And it was actually, that temple was the inspiration for our temple. They completed the temple in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan in 1908. And but that temple was taken over by the Soviet government in the 1920s. And then it was turned into an art gallery by the Soviet government. There was a major earthquake in the 1940s that severely damaged the building. And then in the 1960s, it was taken down. So ours is now the oldest standing house of worship. So, yeah, so that's the first one. And then ours was completed in 1953. So the Baha'is in this area started purchasing the lots. There are like 7 different lots. In 1907, 1908, they were buying the property, and they chose the design. You'll hear more about this in a video about the history and construction. Chose the design in 1920, and it was finally completed in 1953. So that's ours. The next one was in Kampala, Uganda in 1961. It was completed. And there's one in Sydney, Australia. It was also in 1961. The 60s was a busy time for the Baha'is building temples. This one is in Langenhain outside of Frankfurt, Germany. I've been to that one. Dedicated in 1964. This one in Central America, Panama City, Panama, 1972. This is one in Western Samoa, and people wonder, why did you have one in Samoa? But the king of Samoa actually became a member of the Baha'i faith, so that's why we built one there. You'll notice that each of the temples, they all have 9 doors. There's certain things that are similar. They all have 9 doors, representing that everybody is welcome here. And they have a single dome of some sort, representing that there's one God. And they often have gardens and pools of, reflecting pools and things. This is an amazing one in India that was completed in 1986. It's called the Lotus Temple. And it's actually the most visited building in India at this time. It's actually surpassed the Taj Mahal as the most visited building. And it's, you may have seen news reports about our temple saying that it's the largest temple in the world, but it's not the largest. This one in India is 2, maybe 3 times the size of ours. It's huge. And they get thousands of visitors every day. We get about 250,000 visitors a year. They get, I don't even know how many millions they get at their temple. And then the last of the continental temples was the one in South America, in Santiago, Chile, that was dedicated in 2016. So this one is very interesting. It's kind of the like a flower bud. And it's interesting to note, I'll use my little arrow here, but there's these kind of petals come down to a point at the end. And this area right outside of the Andes Mountains is earthquake prone area. And where the petals kind of meet the ground is built in such a way that if there is an earthquake, it will move, so it won't, severely damage the building. So, and now, as I said, there's national and local houses of worship being built around the world. So someday there'll be one in the capital of every country, and then local houses of worship around the world. So there's one now in Battambang, Cambodia, and in Norte del Cauca, Colombia. And there's a few more that I haven't gotten pictures up yet, but you can see that they all look very different, but have that similar structure of the 9 doors and the single dome, representing that everyone's welcome and that there's one God. We're worshiping the same God. And so people often ask, well, if this is the only Baha'i house to worship in North America, where do the Baha'is meet? And that's a good question, but one of the things that Baha'u'llah, the founder, said is that blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow where mention of God hath been made and his praise glorified. So you don't need a temple in order to be connected to God and feel, the spiritual connection. But we do feel that these temples are a place where you can especially feel close to God, and also to worship together with others, and think of ways that you can be of service to humanity. And Baha'u'llah, the founder, said that there needs to be a temple where everyone feels welcome, no matter their religious background or their, racial or, any differences that we have, that there needs to be a place where everyone feels welcome. So there's not a congregation that belongs to the temple. That's kind of a misconception that people have. It's like, how many members do you have? Well, we don't have members. It's there's members of the Baha'i faith, and members of the Baha'i faith from all over the world come to this temple. But the temple itself is for everyone. The temples are built, Baha'u'llah says, as a gift from the Baha'i community to the wider community, as a place for them to come and feel welcome, where they can pray and meditate on their own, and to participate in activities that are held there. So everyone is welcome there. The temple, our temple is open every day from 6 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. And then we have a welcome center, which is where the bathrooms are. So that's important. The welcome center is open from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. every day. We don't have holidays off. It's 365 days a year, unless there's a really super major snowstorm where it's too dangerous for us to drive. But that doesn't happen too often in Chicago. So where do the Baha'is meet then if they don't have a temple? Well, every community in the Baha'i faith, there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. So instead of clergy, we have elected governing councils, 9-member elected governing councils at the local, the national, and the international level. So any community where you live, such as Lincolnshire, there's a Baha'i community here, wherever there's at least 9 members, they elect a local spiritual assembly. So I belong to the Baha'i community in Wilmette. So there's, we have a 9-member local spiritual assembly, and the Baha'i community comes together once every 19 days. So this is going to get a little confusing. Hold on. So the Baha'i calendar, because every religion has a different calendar, the way they keep track of time and their holidays and holy days and things. So the Baha'i calendar is 19 months of 19 days. And so the Baha'i community comes together at the beginning of the month, the 19-day month. So that gathering is called the 19-day feast. And so we come together, and it's a time when, so Wilmette has a local spiritual assembly, and the Wilmette community comes together for Baha'i feast. Evanston, Chicago, actually Chicago is so large, they're broken up into sectors, and they have gatherings for the 19-day feast. All over the world, this happens. The Baha'i community comes together for their 19-day feast. and they usually meet in each other's homes, or they may have a Baha'i center, which is different than a Baha'i temple because, again, the Baha'i temples have 9 sides, nine doors. There's certain things that are specific to Baha'i temples that are not for Baha'i centers. For example, in Baha'i temples, it's only the human voice up there. So there's no instruments. The only music that you'll hear is a cappella singing. And actually, we had our choral festival, our annual choral festival was last Sunday. And I know someone was here that attended, yes. And so it's just the human voice. So there's no instruments up there. So that's one of the restrictions of a house of worship that you wouldn't have in a Baha'i center. You can play music, you can, do whatever you want there, drumming and that kind of stuff. The other thing is that only the sacred writings are shared in Baha'i temples. And because the Baha'i faith, the teachings of the Baha'i faith is that there's one religion of God that's been progressively revealed to humanity through divine educators that we're aware of, like Krishna and Abraham and Moses and Zoroaster and Buddha and Christ and Muhammad, and the latest of these being the founders of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. And so we see religion, we recognize all of them as sacred and divinely revealed, and that these messengers have been sent by God to help humanity to grow closer to God. And if you look on a timeline, you see that they come every 500 to 1,000 years, another one has come. And so for the Baha'is, we consider the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran to be sacred writings. And so inside the temple, you'll only hear the sacred writings read. So even when we have devotional gatherings, which every day at 12:30 and at 6 o'clock, there are devotional gatherings inside the temple. And usually they're only about 10 or 15 minutes long. People will say, well, you don't have clergy. Who does that? Well, it's either staff or volunteers or, Baha'is that are visiting from anywhere. They sit up in the front, and we know that they want to be, readers for the devotions, and they just go up. And so you'll find that in the devotional gatherings, we just get up and they read from, the prayers or a passage from any of the particular sacred scriptures, and then they sit down. Then the next person gets up and reads. So we don't even say, welcome to the Baha'i House of Worship. We don't say that inside because it's just the sacred writings. There's never any speeches, no lectures, no sermons inside Baha'i temples. So again, that's the difference between a Baha'i temple and a Baha'i center. So, a community like in Wilmette, we have the Baha'i temple where we go for our individual Baha'is, will go for our private prayer and meditation, and for holy day gatherings and special events. And we may bring a gathering of people together to say prayers together for a special occasion or something. But we won't go there for our 19-day feast or for, other things where we want to have a discussion, So, so that helps, I think, people understand hopefully a little bit more about the difference between a Baha'i center and where Baha'is meet. And you can raise your hand anytime you have a question. Yes. Okay, so the question is, what do we do at the 19-day feast? That's a good question. So there's 3 parts to the 19-day feast. The first is sharing of the sacred writings and prayers. Each of the Baha'i months, the 19 months, are named after an attribute of God. So splendor, glory, beauty, grandeur, light, mercy, words, perfection, names. I don't know if I got all 19, but questions actually is an attribute of God. It's one of the months. And so oftentimes whoever is hosting that particular feast will choose writings related to that theme of the month, the name of the month. So the first part is the devotional part, where we say prayers and readings. And then the second part is like a business portion. So that's an opportunity for the local spiritual assembly to be able to share with the community any of the concerns or questions or things that the community, the assembly wants to share with the community, and that the community wants to share with the assembly. So it's kind of a business portion first. Oftentimes we'll have a letter from our national governing body, which is called our National Spiritual Assembly. They often will write a letter to all the local spiritual assemblies around the country. And so we'll read that together and often, discuss what's in that message, and anything else that's happening that we, need to discuss. And then also just like, and then there's a third part. The third part is just a social part. So we'll eat and we'll, gather together and meet. Yes. Oh, yes, people will. Well, they're asking about the in Haifa and in Akka, Israel. There are Baha'i shrines there. So people will say, oh, I've been to your temple in Israel. So we don't have a temple in Israel. We have shrines there. And the difference is that, as I said, the faith originated in Persia, which is Iran today. In 1844 is when the faith actually began. And the founders were persecuted. There's actually two, we call them twin founders. The Bab, which means the gate, and he was the figure that was preparing the people for the coming of Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God. So the Bab was actually executed in 1850 in Iran, and the Baha'is were able to capture his remains and keep them hidden until they were able to bury him in an appropriate place. And Baha'u'llah, who was the one that the Bab was preparing the people for, was banished. He came from a wealthy, prominent family, so they didn't kill him outright, but they banished him from Iran to Iraq. He became popular there again, and they banished him to two different cities in Turkey. Became popular again. They banished him to the worst penal colony that they had. This was the Ottoman Empire, and they banished him to Akka or Akko, Israel. It was Palestine at the time, it's Israel today. It was an actually walled prison city is where Baha'u'llah was sent. And he died there in 1892 as a prisoner. So because he died there in Israel, that's a holy place for the Baha'is. So Akka, Israel, is where Baha'u'llah is buried, and there's a shrine there. It's a place of pilgrimage for Baha'is. And then the Bab's remains were buried in Haifa, Israel. So oftentimes when you go to Israel, it's a beautiful site. It has 19 terraces above and below the shrine of the Bab. So oftentimes people will see that. And that is it's not a temple, it's where they're actually buried. And it doesn't have 9 sides. I think it has 8 sides, 4 sides. I'm not really sure, I can't remember. But anyway, that's the difference. Yeah, but thank you for asking that question. Yes, please. Yeah, good question. How do we raise the money for building the temples? Baha'is from all over the world will contribute to the temples that are being built. And Baha'is only accept donations from people who are registered, declared members of the Baha'i faith. So we don't take any donations from people who are not members of the faith. So even at the house of worship, oftentimes people will say, where's the donation box, or can I contribute? And we'll say, no, thank you. We appreciate that, but we don't accept donations. And so the Baha'i community, now when our Baha'i house of worship was being built in the early 1900s, when they were starting to, collecting money for purchasing the property and things, there were only about 1,000 Baha'is in the whole country, the United States. So they didn't have enough money. So Baha'is from all over the world were contributing, especially the Baha'is in Iran. I mean, they were still able to, there was still a Baha'i community there, and they would contributed significantly to the building of our temple. And even to this day, wherever a temple is being built around the world, funds come from all Baha'is all over the world to build it. Yes, all right, I see you first. Right. So someone's asking how you become a member of the Baha'i faith. In different countries, the method is a little different, but the main thing is investigating the founder, Baha'u'llah, and deciding whether you recognize him as a manifestation of God, is kind of the word that we call it, a divine educator, the person, the perfect mirror reflection of God's attributes, And so in the United States, we have a little card, a registration card, and you just put your contact information on it. And then at the bottom, there's a line that says, I believe that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for this day and I wish to become a member of the community. So that's, simply what it is. And then, the Baha'is will ask to make sure that you understand what you're doing, that you're not signing up for a magazine subscription or something, but that you actually understand what it is that you're declaring, and that's it. Because when we need the contact information, because as I said, there's 9-member elected governing councils, in your local community. So wherever you live, if you're over the age of 18, you can elect your local spiritual assembly, and the adult Baha'is can be elected. So any adult Baha'i in the community can be elected to the local spiritual assembly. So we need to know who's actually a member and where they live, and that kind of stuff. The Baha'i elections are actually very unique because there's no electioneering, no campaigning. We don't even talk about who we're going to vote for. It's a matter of your heart. So we come together at our annual convention, for the locals, for the local gathering all over the world. There's these meetings that happen at a certain time in April, where the community comes together and say prayers, and there's a piece of paper with 9 lines on it, and you just pray and think of who are the most qualified people that you feel can make good judgments, are educated and understand the faith, and you just write down those names, and whoever comes out to be the 9, get the 9 highest votes. That's it. And then at the national level, we have conventions in September or October, when regions around the country, we elect a delegate who then, there's 174 delegates in the United States. They come together in April or May. And here, actually, in the lower level of the temple, there's a foundation hall that fits about 350 people. And we have our national convention there, and those delegates come together, and the same thing. It's just silent, prayers, and they fill out 9 names, and put it in the little ballot box, and they're counting. That's it. And then on the international level, every 5 years, all the national spiritual assemblies around the world, and there's about 200, come together in Haifa, Israel, which is the Baha'i World Center. We have, administrative center, as well as the center where the founders are buried. And they elect our Universal House of Justice, is what it's called, 9 members. So it's fascinating how it works, actually. Yes. The number 9, yes. There's a couple of reasons why 9 is significant. One is that it's the highest single digit before, those numbers combined to create all the other numbers. And then also the name Baha'i in Arabic calligraphy adds up to the number 9. And there may even be other reasons that I'm not even aware of, spiritual reasons, but 9, you'll see the number 9 a lot, in the Baha'i faith. Yeah. No more questions at the moment. Okay, let's see. Yes, there's about 1,000 Baha'is in the Chicago area. And I told you there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show you this video. I'm going to share the screen and show you this video. It's 12 minutes on the history and construction of the temple. So this may answer more of your questions. I'm going to see if we can hide the floating meeting control. Oh, but then I don't have the...
For North America.
There you go. Okay.
This sacred space, from its serene and welcoming gardens to its awe-inspiring auditorium, is a space open to all for prayer, quiet contemplation, and spiritual renewal. Here, all are welcome.
The first public mention of the Baha'i faith in America was in Chicago in 1893 at the World Parliament of Religions, an extension of the Chicago World's Fair. By the early 1900s, nearly 1,000 people in the United States and Canada had embraced the Baha'i faith. The members of this new religion wanted to demonstrate their devotion to God and build a temple for all people.
Chicago's location in the heart of the continent and the peaceful beauty of the site on the shores of Lake Michigan made it a natural choice for the first Baha'i house of worship in North America.
Abdu'l-Baha, the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith, traveled from Palestine, now Israel, to North America in 1912. And while in Chicago, laid the cornerstone and was the guest of honor and featured speaker at the groundbreaking ceremony.
He set forth clear instructions for certain aspects that Baha'i houses of worship should include, and specified that women should be involved in the planning and development of it. During one of his addresses in Chicago at the time, Abdu'l-Baha said that Baha'u'llah had commanded that a place of worship be built so that all religions, races, and sects may come together within its universal shelter, that the proclamation of the oneness of mankind shall go forth from its open courts of holiness. Conceptual designs were offered by noted architects from across North America. But of all the designs, delegates to the 1920 National Baha'i Convention unanimously selected the design created by Louis Bourgeois, a French-Canadian architect who had studied at the legendary École des Beaux-Arts Academy of Architecture in Paris. Fulfilling Bourgeois' dream of creating a temple of light and unity, the house of worship's lacy arabesque panels embrace natural light during the day and illumination from within at night.
Construction began in 1920, and from 1920 through 1921, caissons for the building were sunk down to the bedrock, a depth of 120 feet, and the foundation basement was completed. For the next 10 years, no further progress was made. This enabled the Baha'is to accumulate needed funds for the next stage of construction, and it gave engineers time to solve some of the many unprecedented construction problems. In 1930, work on the temple's superstructure began. Architect Louis Bourgeois consulted with John Early, an expert in ornamental concrete in the Washington, D.C. area, about constructing the dome from cast concrete panels mounted on a steel superstructure. To achieve Bourgeois' vision of the whitest possible surface, Early experimented with white Portland cement combined with crushed quartz. The result is a glistening exterior that sparkles in the sunlight. The panels were sculpted, cast, and cleaned at the Early studios, packaged, and then shipped 700 miles on railroad flat cars to Wilmette. At the time, the building was considered the most elaborate concrete structure in the world, consuming thousands of workman hours. In June of 1932, the task of applying the ornamentation to the superstructure was started. And by January of 1943, the entire exterior, including the steps, was finished. During the Second World War years, no work on the temple was undertaken. Then, in November of 1947, work began on the interior, which was completed in 1952. Landscaping of the grounds began in April of that year and was completed by the temple's dedication in the spring of 1953.
9 circular gardens surround the Baha'i House of Worship and are an integral part of the sacred space, serving as outdoor rooms for prayer, meditation, and the appreciation of nature. The temple gardens are seasonally planted with flowers and foliage of various kinds, colors, and fragrances in both native and global species, each where it will best thrive. A physical metaphor that reflects the beauty of unity in diversity.
Behold a beautiful garden full of flowers, shrubs, and trees. Each flower has a different charm, a peculiar beauty. Yet all these flowers spring from the self-same earth. The same sun shines upon them, and the same clouds give them rain. So it is with humanity. It is made up of many races, and its peoples are of different color. But they all come from the same God, and all are servants to Him.
Baha'i houses of worship all have 9 sides, 9 doors, and 9 gardens. The number 9, the highest single digit, represents unity, perfection, and completion. The building's majestic dome calls to mind God's grace sheltering all people. The symbol at the top of the dome is an arrangement of the Arabic words, Ya Baha'u'llah, a prayer or invocation meaning O glory of the All-Glorious. The unity of the religious traditions is represented in the ornamentation on the pillars of the temple. Symbols include the Christian cross, the Star of David, the star and crescent moon of Islam, the hooked cross of Hindu, Buddhist, and ancient Native American traditions, and the 9-pointed star of the Baha'i faith. 9 inscriptions from the writings of Baha'u'llah are carved above the building's entrances and in the alcoves of the auditorium, attesting to the unity of religion and its power to transform the human character.
O rich ones on earth, the poor in your midst are my trust. Guard ye my trust.
Blessed is the spot.
Baha'is have no clergy,
and the house
and sermons or lectures are not permitted in the auditorium. Devotional services include prayer, meditation, the reading of sacred scriptures of the Baha'i faith and other religions, and often music by soloists and a cappella choir. To Baha'is, worship means more than prayer and meditation. Baha'u'llah said that any work done in a spirit of service is a form of prayer.
The temple project took 50 years, continuing through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. The building was financed entirely by voluntary contributions from Baha'is around the world. More than 5,000 people gathered for dedication services as the Baha'i House of Worship was opened to the public in May 1953.
This house of worship, now opening wide its doors to peoples of all creeds, of all races, of all nations, and of all classes, is dedicated to 3 fundamental verities animating and underlying the Baha'i faith: the unity of God, the unity of His prophets, the unity of mankind.
The Baha'i House of Worship reflects a faith of optimism, freedom from prejudice, and service to humankind. It invites its visitors to experience the beauty and serenity of its gardens and interior spaces, to learn about and contemplate the interconnectedness of all people and all religions.
It reminds us of our tie to a just and loving Creator who shelters us all and progressively reveals the guidance that we need. It inspires our highest hopes of a united world and sustainable peace. As Baha'u'llah predicts,
Yet so it shall be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come.
Touch it very.
Testing. Okay. Yeah. There you go. You just got to hold it pretty close to you.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So any questions inspired by the video that you just saw? There. All right. Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. The question is, where do we determine where the next temples are going to be built? The Universal House of Justice makes that decision based on where there's particularly active Baha'i communities. Did I do something there? So for example, Battambang, Cambodia, you might think, wow, why did they choose Battambang, Cambodia? But there was a very active Baha'i community there, you know, where they're, in addition, it's not, yeah, we lost the people offline. I mean, I'm going to keep talking to you guys though. In addition to, you know, these 19-day feasts that I talk about, you know, that the Baha'is do, we have devotional gatherings, you know, Baha'is in their homes will have devotional gatherings with their family or friends or neighbors all over the world. So it's because we feel like these grassroots, you know, it's at the grassroots, it's in the neighborhoods where you really affect change and bring about, you know, spiritual transformation in your communities. And so, so Baha'is all over the world have devotional gatherings in their homes. We also have study circles. Ooh, things are happening. We have study circles where you come together in small groups to, there's a series of books that use quotations from the writings of the Baha'i faith to help us to understand, you know, how we can develop our own spiritual connection to God. Each one has a different kind of focus that it's talking about. And you learn, like that first one, each one of them is helping us to learn how to be of service to humanity in some way. Like that first one is helping us to learn how to share prayers with people, how